In the summer of 2017, I would make a decision that would change the course of my life's work forever. A few years earlier, in the summer of 2012, I was an ambassador for Regina Downtown. So picture me in these large beige cargo pants and this bright fluorescent green polo shirt, pushing this giant whiteboard cart up and down Scar Street. Over the course of that summer, that cart would become my arch nemesis. And the duties that we did for our job as the ambassadors was to just take part in all the events and festivities that were happening downtown. So for those of you that know Victoria Park and spend some time down there over lunch hour or in the summertime, you'll notice that there's lots of different kinds of people. And over that summer when I worked as an ambassador, I got to know a lot of different kinds of people. A lot of homeless people, a lot of people with certain quirks, different ways they dressed, different ways they talked. And it was just so interesting to see the different personalities of humanity that came through. And there's this one individual in particular. He was a young man, and he was homeless. And every single time I would see him, I would always ask, why? Why is he so young on the streets and he has no place to go? This question repeated in my mind over and over and over again. And he was always so kind when I saw him. Always smiled. He never really ever asked for money. He was just kind. One day, I decided to buy him lunch. So I walked into the Cornwall Center. I grabbed him lunch. He thanked me, and I went on my day. I didn't really think anything of it. My job would end at the end of August. And for the next 3 or 4 years, I would see this young man everywhere. I would see him grow up on the streets. I would be driving down Victoria Avenue, and I'd see him panhandling on the boulevard. I would be out on Dudney with my girlfriends, and I would see him sitting outside the bars. And I would just see him walking around the city. And it was really strange because as years passed by, I saw him grow up. And I saw him in so many different experiences, and it was just really strange to me. So one day, I said to myself, if there's ever an opportunity in my life where I can help this man by more than just giving him food and just giving him change, I'm going to. So I made a pact to myself that day in the summer of 2012. In the summer of 2017, I was driving back from Saskatoon from a conference. And does anybody else know those 2 gas stations that are outside of Saskatoon and they have a major dilemma every single time they have to fuel up? That's me. So this particular day, I just had this really intense dilemma. I was just like, I can't figure out where I want to get my gas. So, after this internal conflict for a few minutes, I'm just like, okay, I think I pulled up to the Petro. And I pull up to the Petro, and I look outside my driver's window, and I see a man. And I recognize this man. He looks weathered. He looks like he's been traveling for a long time. All the contents that he has in his life are at his feet. It's him. In that moment, my stomach totally drops. And I have to just compose myself for a minute because I realize what the universe has put in front of me. I get out of my car. He looks at me, and he says, hey, are you going to Regina? And impulsively, I say, yes. And he said, will you give me a ride? And my entire body is shaking the same way that it's shaking right now because I know what I have to do. But I just say, just let me think about it for a moment. So I walk into the gas station, probably pale as a ghost. I don't even really remember walking up to the till and paying. I just felt like I was an entire zombie because I knew what was coming. So I walk out of the gas station, I look at him and I say, yeah, I'll help you. Get into my car and I'll help you pack your things. Well, the gas station attendants thought I was out of my mind. I probably looked like I was out of my mind. And, it's not very often that you see a young woman picking up a hitchhiker. So we got in my car, and he'd be my road trip buddy for the next 2 hours. I learned that his name was Mike. I learned that his mother had overdosed at a young age, that his father was abusive, and he just couldn't handle it, so he had to move out, and he had nowhere to go. We talked about everything under the sun. We talked about his culture to the point where he had tears streaming down his face, and I was a little afraid that I went too far, because when I start asking questions, I can't stop asking questions. We talked about politics. We talked about his life on the road, the moments that he experimented with LSD and walking down the streets of Montreal. And he said that when I was in those moments, I could feel energy so strong that I could look at somebody and I could tell if they were going to look at me like I was a human being or if they were going to put their eyes down and pretend that I didn't exist. There were moments where I was still shaking during this car ride, fearing for my safety. But I knew that when I had to make that decision, I knew that I was going to be safe for whatever reason. And one of the most beautiful lessons that Mike told me that day, or taught me that day, was that he said he didn't belong in a box. He said that he had options to live in a home, to live in a place where there's 4 walls and there's bed and there's warm food, but he didn't want it. He said that every single day he gets to wake up and the world is there. He can go wherever he wants to go. He can do whatever he wants to go, what he wants to do. And it just absolutely changed my world because I'd never, ever looked at homelessness that way. Of all the opportunities that he has, and when we think about opportunities in our lives and what they mean to us, they're usually entirely different. I never thought about writing about that story. But when I got home that day, I still had meetings to go to that afternoon, and I just totally wasn't present for them. But I sat down at my computer and everything just poured out because there was something in my life that I had never thought I would ever do. So the obstacle that presented itself that day was a mental obstacle. So how many of us look in the room or look out in public and look at people and say, why are they like that? Why do they dress like that? Why do they talk like that? Why do they behave like that? In a very judgmental way. I've done that a lot of my life. But what happened that day, and what continues to happen in my life after that moment, after I made that decision, is that I look at every single human being and I ask, what's their story? Instead of asking, why is somebody like that? Opening your eyes and just asking with curiosity, what's their story? Because I know that they're going to have something to teach me. No matter where they live, no matter what they do, no matter what they look like, no matter how they behave. So tonight, you're going to learn from every single person that steps up on this stage. And I invite you to open your minds to curiosity, to ask those questions with a desire to know, to learn, and to really understand why we are all here together and why we belong as one.